John Finkel of the now defunct Versus System superhero trading card game won multiple pro-level events there. He is playing Red White Burn.
Yeah, and Brian Mcatee on Jund Monsters. The Monsters deck's one that we saw tick up in popularity vastly very early on after Born of the Gods was released. It's kind of tapered off a little bit, and that is now kind of split between the green-red style, the original style, and the Jund version. Brian's going with Jund. He is splashing for 2 Dreadbores and 2 Reaper of the Wilds in the main.
So Vidianto on the play starts off with the Boros Skillgate. Brian with a Temple of Abandon. Vidi with a Mountain on the second turn, still no play.
And Brian is going to kick off the action with a Sylvan Caryatid, and Vidi goes to the head immediately with Magma Jet.
So Vidi going to knock Brian down to 16 here. And Vidi's build of Burn is much more of a burn deck. The deck that won in Seattle last week, you see Boros Reckoner and Stormbreath Dragon in the deck, gives it more of a creature and burn spell plan. Vidi just playing Astel and Chandra's Phoenix and main deck Skullcrack. So a much more aggressive take on the strategy as you see a Mountain and a Chandra's Phoenix for Vidi.
Yeah, Vidi does not have Reckoner anywhere. He does have some more creatures on the board. It looks like 4 Fire Drinker Satyr and 3 Viashino First Blade. So a little more creature-based aggression possibly in the post-board games.
So of course, a crew fix for Brian. Trying to get confirmation on what the top card of the deck is. Assuming there's not a land as Brian looks to be moving towards playing a land, a Temple of Malice.
Course of Crewfix is a pretty big deal in this matchup. That 1 life per land drop is going to add up.
Get Brian to move his deck over to the camera. And with that Temple, Brian will pass the turn.
Essentially, every 2 or 3 lands that Brian plays while this Courser's in play is countering a card from Vidi. Vidi basically just wants to throw 7 or 8 cards at Brian's head.
Yeah.
Now, each time that Chandra's Phoenix attacks, that's like a free card as well. So if Brian doesn't find an answer to that, he's going to lose whatever advantage he gains from the Courser.
Yep.
And it looks like Vidi does actually have an answer to the Courser anyway in the form of Chain to the Rocks.
Chandra's Phoenix so powerful in this sort of strategy.
Definitely. You said that Vidi was not playing very many creatures, but he definitely still finds room for 4 Chandra's Phoenix. That card, absolutely uncuttable.
Yeah. See Temple of Triumph here. Vidi's going to leave it on top.
And then go for a Chain to the Rocks and take care of the 1 targetable creature there. So Vidi's hand, we know, has a Skullcrack, a Boros Charm. That is 7 damage, which puts Brian currently at actual 13, but we know based on Vidi's hand, Brian sitting at virtual 6.
So Brian's going to untap and take a draw. You can see a hand, Reaper, Domery, Chandra. Unclear if he has an answer to the Chandra's Phoenix.
He does have Domery. That won't do it this turn. He would need Domery plus another creature, which of course he has. But he needs an answer quickly.
He's going to look for it with Temple of Abandon.
Puts it on the bottom. I'm not sure what he actually has to look for here. Well, I'm not sure. I guess Scavenging Ooze can buy him some life. Taps out for a Reaper.
So Reaper of the Wild's the play here for Brian.
So Vidi is going to get at least 1 more hit in with his Phoenix. He's going to actually, it looks like he is thinking about throwing a shock at Brian's head here. That would put Brian to 11. The Phoenix would knock him to 9. We know Vidi has 7 points of damage in hand.
So Vidi's going to Skullcrack Brian at the end of the turn, dropping him down to 10.
Oh, it goes for Skullcrack.
Untaps and draws Searing Blood. Chandra's Phoenix across for 2, knocking Brian down to 8.
And Brian actually dead to the burn spells in Vidi's hand, it looks like. So he needs to gain some life here.
Dreadbore off the top.
That will not do it. He needs essentially Courser of Crewfix and a land drop to live through to his next turn.
And it's not even clear Brian is aware of the fact that he is about to die too, which could also affect his play.
Yeah, Brian, he can't know for sure, but I think he has to strongly suspect that this is bad news for him. Now, if he doesn't have any way to gain life, he could also have Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze would gain him some life as well. But barring either of those plays, he has to essentially figure out what play would give him the fastest clock.
He's going to go ahead and try to Dreadbore the Chandra's Phoenix.
Okay.
Vidi allows that to resolve.
Yeah, actually, I said that. A more sensible line for him would just be assume that Vidi does not have the correct amount of burn in hand to kill him, and then playing as if that's the case, he would want to save damage by using his removal spell on the Chandra's Phoenix. Now we know that's not going to be good enough.
Reaper of the Wilds comes across after Brian scries, plays Domri, and this is going to leave him essentially dead.
Gets a little value before he dies.
Shows a Gorklan Rampager to the Domri.
Passes, Vidi shows him some burn.
And that's 6 plus the Phoenix hit is 8, and Brian has exactly 8, and so we're going on to a second game. Vidianto Wijaya quickly up a game with red-white burn. So moving on to the sideboard here, does Brian have some more life gain, some more removal, something to help this out?
He does have more life gain. He actually has a pretty substantial piece of life gain in the form of Nylea's Disciple. He has 3 of those out of the board. Other than that, I don't... he has 3 ultimate price as well, so that could buy him some time against Vidi's creatures. Other than that, I don't see him bringing in any of his other cards. But those 3 Nylea's Disciples, those are a huge swing if he can resolve one.
And on the other side, Vidianto with 2 copies of Chain of the Rocks, 4 Satyr Fire Dancers, 4 Fire Drinker Satyrs, 2 Blind Obediences, and 3 Viashino First Blades. I think you can anticipate the 2 copies of Chain of the Rocks coming in, and the Satyr Fire Dancers are reasonable as well.
Sure. Satyr Fire Dancer in the board is an interesting choice. I know there was some discussion last week. I did a deck tech with Dave DeBurn, who was playing this deck. He was adamant that Satyr Fire Dancer, not a real card, not something you wanted to be doing in the burn archetype. Other people are main decking it. Vidi wants 4, doesn't want 4 in the main. Presumably he just wants to bring them in against matchups that are going to have creatures to destroy. So he's hedging against things like Esper, which makes sense.
I'm also not a huge Fire Dancer fan myself. I think there's just a lot of moving parts involved with that card. And most of the opponents you're going to be playing against will also have removal in their deck, so just having the stars aligned the right way is very challenging. The upside is huge. When everything breaks the right way,
definitely,
it's an incredibly powerful card, but I think on the balance, it's less likely to work than likely to work.
Sure. And it's actually not even that reliable here. Jund Monsters, of course, it's a monsters deck. It has plenty of monsters, but they're big. They generally are going to have 4 or 5 toughness. Brian is going to give him some targets for cheap burn in the form of things like Scavenging Ooze, but Satyr Fire Dancer actually, it needs to kill the creature in order to. Actually, wait. I think I have that backwards. Yeah, just never mind on that. Satyr Fire Dancer, totally reasonable here, although it actually is. Vidi is going to need to get a clear shot of resolving 2 burn spells in 1 turn to actually get any value out of the Satyr Fire Dancer.
Or he has to be looking at something like Gorklan Rampager being in play or something along those lines. It's asking a lot. I think Blind Obedience is a very good tool here, as well as the Jund Monsters list flush with haste creatures. And little pieces of burn and life gain. Vidi's in the market for both of those things.
Definitely. So, looks like both players have finished boarding. They are in the shuffling process. And Brian's going to double check.
And it's curious, the builds of the burn deck that have a lot of creatures in my mind have the option of playing a creature and creature removal game, and sometimes those creature removal spells can turn into burn spells if the game breaks the right way. They also have the option of just being a burn deck. Vidi's build with much fewer creatures, no Boros Reckoners, no Stormbreath Dragons, can really only be a burn deck.
Yeah, and I think that's to his disadvantage here. Boros Reckoner at his absolute best when it has the possibility of blocking something huge like a Polakranos.
Yeah, I think that Boros Reckoner is much worse against Jund Monsters than against green-red monsters because they're just going to be flushed with more Dreadbore and Doomblade type of cards. The green-red build of it, much less equipped at answering it cleanly.
That is true, and Brian Brian only has the 2 Dreadbores and the 2 Mortars in his main deck. He can't afford to board any of those out, even though they're not that great. Against what we know to be Vidi's deck, which is not really going to give him a lot of targets, particularly targets that don't have haste. Actually, literally all of Vidi's targets have haste, except for possibly the Fire Dancers, which we don't know if he's going to bring in.
Yeah, and Ash Zealot might be coming out here as well because you're looking at a deck with Sylvan Caryatid and a bunch of 4/5s and 5/5s.
Yeah,
so.
if Ash Zealot sticks on turn 2, it may get in for 2 damage total.
Right.
But other than that, it's very unlikely to actually affect the game in any significant way. So knowing that, Vidi might actually just board down to literally just 4 Chandra's Phoenix in his board, in his main deck. So given that, Brian actually maybe doesn't want his removal spells, but he doesn't actually know that Vidi doesn't have access to things like Boros Reckoner, things like Stormbreath Dragon. so he has to keep them. And we mentioned removal. He may actually even bring in some ultimate prizes from the board.
Right, it's challenging because the Planeswalkers also aren't that well equipped for this sort of fight too. If Vidi is just trying to burn Brian out from 20, then cards like Domri and Xenagos lose a lot of value if he's not actually playing the board. So Brian may not be able to take out all of these cards just because he has to leave. He can't sideboard out everything, and he's got some inefficient tools for how burn-oriented VD is.
Yeah. Brian has 4 Domri, 2 Xenagos. He actually has 1 Vraska the Unseen as well, and 1 Chandra Pyromaster. So a grand total of 8 Planeswalkers. None of them actually that exciting in this matchup.
So VD just shuffling. He looked like he was pretty thorough with the way that he was wanting to figure out his sideboarding here. Like we've been discussing, he has a lot of different routes he can go down. A lot of different cards could potentially come in or not come in at all.
Do you like Blind Obedience in this matchup?
I do like Blind Obedience. I definitely like it more than the Fire Dancer. You are going to hit some collateral damage because it's likely Brian's bringing in Abrupt Decays to fight some of your creatures anyway, if he has access to them.
He does not, actually. He has 2 Golgari Charm, which I do not expect him to bring in.
Well, he's also fighting against Chain of the Rocks, and regeneration can matter in some spots too. It's not out of the realm of question. So there is some splash damage that Blind Obedience has here, but again, a reasonable number of haste creatures in the Jump Monsters list, and additionally, both VD gaining life and dealing incremental points of damage to Brian are 2 valuable tools in the matchup. He does want both things.
Definitely.
So he might be happy just to play a 2-mana card that says Extort on it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Blind Obedience, this, I believe, is the first time I've actually seen that card in a burn deck.
It was prevalent in the Australian build, that top 32 at the Grand Prix.
Okay.
And I've run into a lot of Blind Obediences online lately.
Fair enough. Okay, out of burn decks?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not the most common thing, but I do see it sometimes.
All right. In online, actually, there's a lot more burn than there is even in the real world.
Which is prevalent. You see Brian here start off play with an Overgrown Tomb, and VD appears to have Secret Foundry.
Okay, sitting with, it looks like that is a Fire Dancer, so he did bring those in. He also had access to Chain of the Rocks and several lands.
And a Sylvan Caryatid off a mountain for Brian.
That's huge. Brian has a lot of very powerful cards. Mostly they start at 4 and 5. So actually just getting that Sylvan Caryatid on turn 2 is basically time walk in this matchup.
Yeah, and not having to play it off of Ravnica dual land as well, which he had to do in the first game. And there's the Fire Dancer.
Does nothing about Sylvan Caryatid. So I'm anxious to see. Okay, he drew Polakranos, so he definitely has at least one very strong play, one that is likely out of the range of Satyr Fire Dancer this turn. A Searing Blood would do it, but.
And now Brian debating, does he even want to play this Ravnica duel untapped here in the face of all the burn that VD can produce? It looks like he's going to decide to do that, but he is giving it some pause.
He doesn't want to, but I think you have to here. You've got to get a clock going. If you give VD essentially a free turn, that's a free draw step. That's presumably more burn to the head. VD's bottleneck is cards, basically. If VD casts enough cards, he's going to win.
So there is an untapped stomping ground for Brian. He falls to 18.
Okay, looks like he is not going to. Interesting. He's not going to cast the Polakranos. He is going to cast another Sylvan Caryatid.
Suspiciously holding up 2 mana off of the untapped land he played.
And I believe I saw a Golgari Charm in hand.
So VD untaps and takes a draw, draws Chandra's Phoenix for the turn.
All right. Well, that would be a way to get in some damage. It's going to cruise right over these Sylvan Caryatids. I would expect that to be the play. Again, we see Chain of the Rocks, we see War Leader's Helix, which you currently can't cast, and we see a Searing Blood. So actually, VD did have the answer to Polakranos in the form with Satyr Fire Dancer in play. Although he would need. See, how would that work? Actually, yeah, even that doesn't do it without some other burn spell to the head, which he currently doesn't have.
So VD deliberating this, of course, given some cause for pause here as Brian played a dual land untapped and held up mana.
Yeah.
Trying to go through the permutations, what tricks could he possibly be playing against right now?
That would most likely, in VD's mind, spell Abrupt Decay, I would think. I don't think VD minds if Chandra's Phoenix gets Abrupt Decayed.
But it is Golgari Charm instead, which is going to take down the Fire Dancer. Chandra's Phoenix comes across for only 1 point of damage, knocking Brian down to 17.
Okay. So Brian did find an answer to the creature on board. He does not currently have an answer to that Phoenix. And needs to get an actual threat into play. VD has an answer to the first threat in Chain of the Rocks.
So Overgrown Tomb comes into play, tapped. Brian casts Palachronos, the world leader, leaving up a Sylvan Caryatid. VD quickly untaps and draws. Answer already in hand in the form of Chain of the Rocks.
He draws a Mutavault, so that's not actually going to be able to attack very effectively against these two Sylvan Caryatids. Although, in conjunction with the one in play, he might get a chance to sneak in a damage, one attack or two.
And it may at least contort Brian's play here as you see Chain of the Rocks take down Palachronos.
VD's going to get in one more free hit with this Phoenix. He's going to consider... Oh, okay. I think he was maybe considering just attacking with the Mutavault just to put Brian to the test, but he decides not to.
So just plays a mountain and passes the turn.
And Brian, I know we saw a Gorkland Rampager in hand.
And then Nylea's Disciple as well.
Okay. So Brian would like to get some more green permanents in play. Nylea's Disciple, game 4, very good. It could feasibly be better, and I think he has at least another turn to set it up. He's not facing death this turn in any way, I wouldn't think.
So trying to build up his board a little bit more, goes ahead and plays Gorkland Rampager. VD untaps and draws
another Satyr Fire Dancer.
And in conjunction with that Boros Charm, we might see something pretty sweet this turn.
Yep, that's going to be some value for VD. Now, do you just fire it off here, or do you wait?
I think, well, it's really risky with Brian having 2 mana up, and there's no real big rush in the face of the Rampager, so I might sit, but it may be riskier just allowing Brian to untap.
Sure. If he does wait, I would assume that we'll see it used during Brian's beginning of combat at the very least. If you allow Brian to attack with the Gorkland Rampager, then you allow him to respond to a burn spell with another Gorkland Rampager. So, it looks like VD's going to do it in the in the upkeep.
Yeah, we're in Brian's upkeep here, so he's going to try to Boros Charm. It succeeds. Fire Dancer redirects the damage, or rather adds the damage onto the Rampager, and that opens up the window for Brian to play Nylea's Disciple, going up to 13.
Okay. Again, gaining 4, not the worst thing that can happen here, but it does not actually swing the board in any, or swing the race, really. Brian has not succeeded in getting any significant pressure going.
And another Boros Charm off the top for VD.
So VD, again, going to get a free hit with that Phoenix. Sits with Searing Blood, which can't currently kill something, so that's not damage to the head.
So Phoenix across the table for 2 points of damage, knocking Brian down to 11.
Okay.
And VD just passes the turn.
VD, we saw, had War Leader's Helix and the Boros Charm that he just drew. So 8 currently. He could also actually turn on the Searing Blood in conjunction with Boros Charm and the Satyr Fire Dancer. So VD actually, again, has Brian dead with the burn that he has in hand.
So a Domri off the top here for Brian, and it looks like he's going to cast it.
Needs to hit another Nylea's Disciple here.
So there is Domri.
He's going to take a peek. Actually, he's going to think about it.
He may want to fight here, you know, that both of VD's creatures are threatening in their own way.
Yeah, for sure. And again, this is a spot. We know that VD has the win with the cards in his hand. Brian doesn't know that, and he may have to play as if VD doesn't have it.
So he's going to plus, looking for some help, finds Elvish Mystic.
Okay, that will not get him out of this jam. Once again, ekes out a little bit of value before falling to VD's burn spells.
So there's the Elvish Mystic for Brian, and most likely will be passing the turn momentarily, sends it back. At the end of the turn, VD goes ahead and Searing Bloods the Elvish Mystic, which then causes the Satyr to trigger, which then allows VD to finish off the Nylea's Disciple as well.
Oh, he didn't have enough red sources. I missed that. Okay, so he actually could not cast both Searing Blood and Boros Charm. So it looks like he actually didn't have it there.
So lightning strike off the top for VD. The attack from the Phoenix.
Yeah, in conjunction. Yeah, with the Phoenix, that's going to do it.
And Boros Charm and lightning strike finish it off. And Vidianto Wijaya in very quick fashion, 2-0 over Brian Mcatee playing Jund Monsters.
VD's going to advance to 7-1. This tournament, it's tight. We had 694 players. The cut to 11 rounds is 709.
Yeah.
So we were, 16 players short, something like that. What that actually ends up meaning is that we're going to have a logjam in the last round. There are going to be a lot of X and 1s that will not be able to draw into top 8.
Yeah, once you get closer and closer to the threshold where you would add another round, the required records get stiffer, and you see people having to actually play out the last round instead of being able to draw.
Yeah,
So-
VD actually lost his very first round as well. VD is a comeback warrior currently, but usually what that means is your tiebreakers are going to be kind of in a slump. So I would actually expect VD to need to win the next 2 rounds in order to top 8.